Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen, dear distinguished guests. My name is Ferenc Németh. I'm a research fellow at the Institute for Foreign Affairs and Trade from Budapest. And I would also like to welcome you on behalf of the Institute in this afternoon's webinar series. We started this webinar series entitled Nationalisms in the Western Balkans last year. And our first event last December focused on the Macedonian identity and the recent feud between North Macedonia and Bulgaria with regards to identity-related issues. As for this year, we are kicking off our discussion with another interesting issue and presentation by Professor Dr. Nexhmedin Spahiu from Mitrovica. And we are going to talk about the Albanian as well as the Kosovar identity, how those two are intertwined with each other, whether we can talk about a separate Kosovar identity, and all sorts of questions related to this very peculiar identity-related topic. What needs to be said about our distinguished guest, Professor Spahiu, is that he's a mathematician and also an esteemed political scientist, author of many books, including The Theory of Kosovar Nation. And also he taught many classes and lectures in the universities of Tirana, Tetovo, Pristina, as well as in the University of Hamburg over the years. And Professor Spahiu is basically mainly focused on identity-related questions and concerned about Kosovo-Albanian identity in details. Professor, thank you very much on behalf of the Institute for accepting our invitation. We are glad that you are here with us. And without further ado, I would like to give you the floor for your presentation. And after your presentation, I will open the floor for questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please indicate it in the chat box below. And please be microphone and camera ready because I'm going to connect you so you can ask your question face to face or more in person. So without further ado, Professor Spahiu, the floor is yours.
Thanks you. Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. Okay, I should say at the beginning that on these issues, I'm a little bit a pioneer now here, especially when it regards to the Kosovo identity. And there are not so many people that joined me in this work. So I'm dealing since 30 years. Even regarding the Albanian national identity and nation building, there are just few people who dealt with them. There are some scholars between two world wars in Tirana who wrote some articles about clarifying what is a nation and what should be the Albanian nation, like Branko Merjani, Gjergj Fishta, Vanxhel Kocha, Nebel Chika. But then later, no one's dealt with that. We have a study about national awakening process done by Stavros Kendi at University of California as his PhD work on 1966, but it's a work about the history, how the Albanian nation was created. So, I mean, that's all what is done within the Albanian community, scientists in this regard. I was delighted when you asked me to do the article in this regard, because most of my works have written in Albanian having problems to explain or to these issues within the Kosovo and Albanian academics, because since the end of Second World War, all those scholars that I mentioned between two world wars who dealt with this issue has been forbidden. I mean, all of them, they were proclaimed as enemies of the state, and basically in the schools and universities in Albania, in Kosovo, nation was to the concept of nation was related like to the ethnicity. There was no distinct between nation and ethnicity. So de facto, many scholars, whether in Tirana or in Pristina, they do not understand what is this distinction between these two terms, between ethnicity and nation. So they would say, for example, that American nation doesn't exist, or that the Swiss nation doesn't exist, or something like that. So I wrote 9 books explaining and dealing with this issue. So now I'm delighted to know that you obliged me to do this study, and I'm trying to explain part of it, because here my articles now, it's 15 pages, and I cannot maybe read all of the article, but just part of it, and I hope it will be published, and everybody who is now interested and who is integrated by my speech now could read it. My article now, it's titled Kosovo and Albania in the Future, Closer or Further Apart from Each Other. So this is a study that addresses Kosovo and Albanian identity relationship. It highlights the similarities and differences of those two communities throughout their historical journey on their respective lands. The paper identifies key historical moments that have influenced Kosovo national identity branding. Those observations of these historical moments elicit a conclusion that occurrence of cultural and political differences within the Albanian ethnicity since 19th century are instigated by Serbian posture towards Kosovo. The paper substantiated a clear cultural and political identity of Kosovo, indicating its forthcoming solidification whilst keeping Kosovo and Albanian differences distinct, despite the eventual change in Belgrade's stance towards Kosovo. The study addresses concerns that arise from some of the voices in European diplomacy that favors Tirana's official involvement in the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue. Analysis of historical path progression in this study, in fact, evidences rather the opposite. Yes, the involvement of official Tirana in the Pristina-Belgrade dialogue would only benefit Belgrade and consequently have a negative impact on Kosovo-Serbia consolidated compromises aimed by USA and European Union. I started my article by mentioning one case, one incident that happened just on 21st of September 2020 in Vushtre, a town 20 kilometers north of Pristina. Maybe it's good to share this map, the first map, to see just the map of Kosovo. So when I mention these towns, I mean to have a view, if you can, please. This day has been inaugurated the statue of Ahmet Kasnici, former exiled Minister of Defense of the Republic of Kosovo. He was killed in Tirana 22 years ago, and the murder, still enlightening, is supposed to have been committed by the political rivals in cooperation with the state structures of the Albanian state. And at the time, the Speaker of the Parliament of Kosovo, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Interior Affairs, the Minister of Defense, the Commander of the Army, and the other officials and the foreign ambassadors attended the ceremony of the inauguration of the state. I'm speaking about this event on September last year. At the end of this event, the town's assembly performed a dance where dancers waved Kosovo flags. The choreographer had prearranged that at the end of the dance, the flags of Kosovo would be lowered to the ground and the dancer would appear on the stage raising the Albanian flag. So everywhere in the world, this would have been a big scandal. So, supposing that this show was staged somewhere in the other continent, the Kosovo government would have had to make a protest note. But in this case, the only reaction came from the author of this paper. All Kosovo highest state leadership considered this dance as a manifestation of patriotism. So an external observer finds it impossible to understand this behavior unless he or she delves deeply into the genesis of Kosovo and Albanian issues. Many foreign visitors have noticed, including my dearest ambassador, Marcus, noticed that in the public spaces in Kosovo, there is a greater presence of the flag of Albania than that of Kosovo. The reasons are manifold. We will analyze each of these in the following. The first, Albanian national ideology present in Kosovo was present in Kosovo earlier than in the territory of today's Albania. The second, every nation in its collective memory evokes its best days in history. The best days in the history of Kosovo were those of the time of the Second World War, when Kosovo got rid of Serbian regime and the Serbian, sorry, so the best days in the history of Kosovo are those of the time of the Second World War, when Kosovo got rid of the Serbian regime. The Serbian regime aimed to exterminate its majority population by the most brutal methods. The sudden end of the poverty and genocide was accompanied by freedom, emancipation, and abundance. Kosovo Albanians were the ones who took power in Tirana. I'm speaking about the, about the time of Second World War when Hitler demolished Yugoslavia. This entire booming was accompanied by the presence of the Albanian national flag. The emotional connection to this symbol is actually the emotional connection to the Golden Age. The third, the Serbs have insisted that there is no ethnic connection between the Albanians of Albania and those of Kosovo. For the Kosovars, the Albanian flag was a mean of resisting Serbian tendency. And the fourth, being supported by the West, independent Kosovo was considered by Serbia as a more dangerous formula than the idea of annexation of Kosovo to Albania. The entire Serbian intelligence network in Kosovo sided in opposition to the Kosovo flag, unable to rival the flag of Kosovo with the flag of Serbia. They motivated rivalry through the flag of Albania. The first three reasons created very suitable ground for this activity of the Serbian intelligence agencies. The historical journey of the Albanian ethnic corpus in 19th and 20th century give us the arguments for the above thesis. Until the creation of the independent Albanian states, the territories inhabited by Albanians in the Balkans were part of the Ottoman Empire. The ideas of the French Revolution in the Ottoman Empire penetrated after the Crimean War in 1853-1856. Here, the British and the French helped the Ottoman Empire in the war against Russia, but with this help, they introduced a Western European spirit together with the ideas of the French Revolution. Albanians, divided into 4 religious communities, Sunni Muslims, Bektashi, Orthodox Christian, and the Catholics, found the process of nation building very more problematic. The reasons are given below. Influenced by the millet system in the Ottoman Empire, Greek and Serbian and Bulgarian nation building took place on the basis of the confessional community. The battle for church autocephality and the country's independence were promoters to each other. The Greek gained the independence of the country in 1829-30, while the autocephality of their church in 1850. The Serbs gained the independence of their country in 1878 and the autocephality of their church in 1879. The Bulgarians gained autocephality of the church in 1870, while the autonomy of their country in 1878 and independence, of course, in 1908. The other religious non-Christian Orthodox communities of those ethnicities were exterminated during the respective revolutions. One part was killed, another part was forced to convert to the Orthodox religion, and the another part was forced to migrate within the remaining territories of the Ottoman Empire. Therefore, Greek Muslims, Serb Muslims, and Bulgarian Muslims in respective newly independent countries were of insignificant proportions. Now, after all of this, what I mentioned. The national ideas of the part of the Muslim population in the Ottoman Empire were a reflection of the national ideas in the territories that were pulling out from it. The Turkish national idea could not exclude the ethnicities that had already been Islamized in the majority of, like Albanians, Bosniaks, Kurds, etc. Nor the Muslim minority, Hungarian, Romanian, Croatian, Serbian, Bulgarian, Greek, etc., which were excluded from the coexistence with Christians of these respective ethnicities. Giving together for several centuries a common religion, and they had created a symbiosis of the sense of belonging, which the national ideologies within the empire defined as a Turkish nation. In this atmosphere, the first Albanians who spread the spirit of the French Revolution did not proclaim ideas for the Albanian nation, but rather for the Turkish nation. The Albanian national idea commenced by members of the Orthodox community, Naum Vecilharji, born in 1787 and died in 1846, Jeronim Derada in 1814 and died in 1903, and then by the members of the Catholic community, like Zafiu Bani, who was the translator into the Austro-Hungarian consulate in Shkodra, born in 1918, Pashko Vasa, who was later the governor of the Lebanon, born in 1825 and died in 1893. The one who will later be called the ideologue of the Albanian national awakening, Sami Frashi, born in 1850 and died in 1904, worked in parallel for the Turkish national idea and for Albanian national idea. The strongest evidence for this is that in 1937, the king of Albania, Ahmed Zogu, asked Mustafa Kemal Ataturk that the remains of the Frashi brothers, Abdul, Naim, and Sami, be relocated from Istanbul to Tirana, the Turkish government handed over the remains of the two older brothers, but not Sami Frashe, on the ground that Sami belongs to more to the Turkish culture. However, the Albanian national consciousness proclaimed by some educated individuals from the all Albanian religious communities were insufficient to enter in the mass of the population for several reasons. In the Albanian Orthodox Christian community, the priests were predominantly Greek and sought to inject the Greek national ideology. The expectations were some priests who belonged to the Albanian national movement, but they were persecuted, poisoned, and killed by their Greek superiors. The Albanian Orthodox Autocephalous Church would be recognized late in 1937, which means 25 years after the declaration of independence of Albania. In the Albanian Catholic community, the priests were educated either in Italy or Austro-Hungary. Those powers, although interested in creating an Albanian national consciousness, had rivalry with each other, and what one did, the other had undone, and vice versa. The Muslim community, which consisted of 25% of the Albanian population, was dominated by Turkish national idea in schools and religious institutions. All the Albanian Protestant community was completely involved in the Albanian national idea, but this community was too small, almost negligible. Albanian national mass awareness took place ahead of the Albanian national mass awareness, yes, consciousness took place just on the eve of Berlin Congress. This awareness mainly affected the population of the vilayet of Kosovo and partly that of Shkodra. Perhaps you understand what means the vilayet. Vilayet was a kind of administrative, province within the Ottoman Empire, and vilayet of Kosovo was today's Kosovo, including Skopje, Tetovo on North Macedonia, and today's Sanjak of Novi Pazar. If you have still in this map of Kosovo, the first map, you can see what represented the vilayet of Kosovo. That was not exactly today's Kosovo, but much bigger. So what happens just on the eve of the Berlin Congress? About 200,000 Albanians of the Sanjak of Niš, today's Niš in Serbia, were persecuted by the Serbian army in 1877 and 1878. The arrival of such a large number of refugees in the territory of Kosovo raised concerns about the further fate of the Albanians in the territory, and this was converted into the awakening of the Albanian nation consciousness. As a result, the legal prison was founded on 10 of June 1878, just 3 days before the Berlin Congress. This was an organization of noble, religious, and military leaders, mainly from Kosovo, and the Sanjak of Novi Pazar, and the North Albania a little bit. The organization made the first attempt for an Albanian state. In 1881, this organization was forcibly extinguished, and its leaders were imprisoned by the High Court. Now we will see that also, because all this time I'm explaining how the Albanian national consciousness was much more, concentrated in the territory of Kosovo than in the rest of the Albanian territories at the time. We'll see what happened about the schools. you know, because as education is a part of national consciousness. Also, the first Albanian school was opened in 1887 in Korça, southern Albania, by the small Albanian Protestant community. Most Albanian schools were opened in Kosovo. According to Ottoman statistics at the time, Kosovo was the Ottoman vilayet with the highest percentage of educated people in the Ottoman Empire. In the spring of 1912, the most important Albanian delegates in the Ottoman parliament, Hasan Prishtina from Kosovo, Esat Toptanit from central Albania, Azet Veoni, Mufit Libohova, and Ismail Kemal Vlora from southern Albania, met in Istanbul, where they have sworn an oath to organize a general uprising to seek a unification of 4 Albanian vilayets into autonomous entity with ultimate aim in establishing independent Albania in near future. Unfortunately, all of them betrayed the oath, except Hasan Prishtina in Kosovo. In June, July, August 1912, Hasan Prishtina organized an uprising comprising around 30 to 40,000 fighters, in which case he took control of almost all the cities of the vilayet of Kosovo, including Skopje, then the capital of the vilayet. I think we are, I'm not good in time to, so I should shorten.
We still have 25 minutes, Professor.
We still have 25 minutes, okay. The Ottoman government was forced to accept the terms of the Kosovo insurgents. I mean, to give the autonomy for the Albanian vilayets. But once this was understood by the Balkan governments, the latter formed an alliance with each other, and on 8th of October 1912, Montenegro, Serbia, Greece, and Bulgaria attacked the Ottoman Empire with about 1 million soldiers. Albanian territories, after a comprehensive resistance, were occupied by neighboring countries. Only 2-3 towns around Vlora in the South Albania remained unoccupied. Among the Balkan allies, Serbia took the lion's share. After the decisions of the Conference of Ambassadors in London on 29 of July 1913, where the existence of the Albanian nation was recognized and the borders of Albania were defined, as they, I mean, to mention that independence of Albania was proclaimed just on 28th of November 1912. And the borders of Albania, they were defined as they are today, right now. I mean, the Serbian, Montenegrin, and Greek armies were forced to withdraw from the officially recognized Albanian territory. Kosovo, Macedonia, and Sanjak of Novi Pazar were subjected to an extermination terror, which was interrupted by World War I, but continued again after the war. After the First World War, until in 1941, when Hitler demolished Yugoslavia. The most important Kosovo politicians left their properties in Kosovo to engage in political activity in Albania. The rest remained in Kosovo to protect the Albanian population, their properties under the Serbian state. Above, I explained how Hasan Prishtina was betrayed in 1912. In fact, the conflict between politicians from Kosovo and those from southern and central Albania continued in independent Albania. This conflict is best mirrored in the words of the Prime Minister Ahmet Zogu at the end of December 1924. Later, on 25, he became president of Albania, and in 28, he became the king of Albania. And Zogu declared on December 24, Albania cannot make progress without good relations with neighbors. In order to have good relations with neighbors, we must get rid of turbulent elements that disrupt these relations. It is evident that he was referring to the politicians from Kosovo and Macedonia. Elezi Sufi, Bajram Curi, Zia Dibra, Hasan Prishtina, Bedri Pijani, Dervish Mitrovica, Recep Mitrovica, etc. Thus, out of those 7 prominent politicians from Kosovo, I mean, they were prominent in also politicians in Tirana as well, in Albania at that time, from Kosovo and Macedonia, within a war, within a year, 3 of them were killed by Zogu, while the 4th was killed after 5 years. The other 3 managed to take refuge in Italy. So he, I mean, within a year, he succeeded to get rid of all of the Kosovo politicians in Albania. Only after a decade, when King Zogu strengthened his power, after eliminating all Kosovo politicians in Albania, he began to establish contacts with Fera Draga, the principal political leader of all the Albanians in Yugoslavia. This was a relationship between mother country and the ethnic minority in the neighboring country, to the extent that it did not jeopardize relations with Belgrade. On Italian army attack to Albania, on 7th of April 1939, after a day resistance, King Zogu runs away to London. The Albanian parliament decided to unify royal crown with Italy. When in the spring of 1941 Hitler demolished Yugoslavia, most of Kosovo, part of Macedonia, and part of Montenegro joined to Albania. Please show this map 3, if you can show it. Oh, this one. You see how when Hitler demolished Yugoslavia, how this was. So this was annexed to Hungary. I mean, part of Vojvodina and part of Slovenia. So part of Slovenia went to annex to Italy, part to Germany. Independent state of Croatia was created in the territory of today's Croatia and Bosnia. Montenegro was established as an independent country, and of course within the presence of Italian army. And here, independent state of Croatia was half Italian army, and the other half was a German army. While this territory with green were joined to Albania, part of Montenegro, part of Macedonia, and part of today's Kosovo were joined to Albania. Macedonia and the parts of Serbia were joined to Bulgaria. And this what left for Serbia. I mean, this was Serbia with 2 provinces, Banat and the region of Mitrovica in today's Kosovo, and Sanjak of Novi Pazar. So these were, 1941-43, it was autonomous province within the Serbian state, of course, occupied by Germans. While we will see that in 1943, when Italy will, I mean, Italians will capitulate it, this part, and will join to Albania as well, and also Skopje and Kumanovo and Preševo, the part of this part of Macedonia. Today's Macedonia will also join to Albania until the end of the World War. So this is, let me continue with the text, sorry. Because I cannot. What's happened with my laptop? Oh, that's okay now. So this was a situation what happened for Kosovo. This was a real renaissance. Education in the mother tongue, administration in the mother tongue, business opportunity, and many other benefits had a symbol. That was the Albanian national flag. so I explained what happened after the admission of the defeat of Italy. It was the Kosovo political leaders who reorganized the Albanian state. The most prominent figure of this time, Jafar Deva from Mitrovica, became the Minister of Interior of Albania, while he reserved the post of Prime Minister of Albania for his oldest compatriot, Recep Mitrovica, who was one of the those who signed the independence of Albania in 1912 and was the first Minister of Education of Albania. But then on 1925, he took asylum because King Zogu wanted to eliminate all Kosovo politicians. I mean, in that, before taking over the task of reorganizing the Albanian state, Jafar Deva in 1943 had a conversation with a German representative for the Balkans, Herbert Neubacher, to whom he had conditioned that if Germany wanted its army to be received amicably by the Albanians, should enable the province of Mitrovica and Novi Pazar to separate from Serbia and join to Albania. And the second condition was that the Germans would not interfere in the internal affairs of Albania. The first condition was accomplished with the Second League of Prizren, which was held from 16 to 20 of September 1943, while the second condition would also create an advantage to the Albanian state compared to the other countries where there was a presence of German forces. The Albanian government had not been forced to hand over the Jews to the German army, and as a result, many Jews fleeing Serbia, Bulgaria, and Greece, as well as other European countries, found refuge in Albania. In 1945, the number of Jews in Albania, which included Kosovo and the parts of Macedonia and Montenegro, increased fivefold compared to the beginning of the World War II. Although the creation of the ethnic Albania was accompanied by educational blooming, cultural emancipation, sports, and economic prosperity, incomparably better than in previous periods during the reign of King Zog and during the Italian occupation, part of the political class, foreseeing that Germany would lose the war, they were lined up on the side of the Anglo-Americans. They wanted to take advantage of the Anglo-American victory. These forces were concentrated mainly in southern Albania. The Republicans of the Bali Komtar, that means National Front, and in central Albania, the monarchists of the legality, which are supporters of the King Zog. Serbian communists, being worried about the losing Kosovo on 8th of November, in 1941 had founded the Communist Party of Albania. Now, on 1943, the communist-led partisan guerrilla movement was concentrated in southern Albania. In Kosovo and the other territories of Albania, within which until 1941 were parts of Serbia, the partisan movement was negligible. Exactly when the dream of the forefathers of the Albanian nation was realized, when most of the territories with a majority of the Albanian population were included in one state, when the welfare and the citizens made the greatest progress in history, the civil war took place. The basic reason was the misunderstanding between the Albanians of so-called Old Albania, that means territories of the Albanian state in the years 1913, 1941, and the new Albania, Kosovo and the other territories annexed in 1941 and 43. The life of 3 decades in the independent Albanian state and that in the Serbian or Yugoslav state exposed examination made the citizens of those 2 Albanias have different views. These disagreements also had their political representatives. This crack, sorry. This crack in the Albanian society was mostly blown by can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, because
Yes,
I
15
thought
more
something.
minutes.
How much?
No, we can hear you. 15.
15. Okay, that's good. Most Albanian politicians did not see the danger from the communists as Jafar Deva did. Even Prime Minister Recep Mitrovica himself neglected the danger from the communists. The clearest example of this neglect was the intervention to get the young communist Bujar Hoxha out of prison because of his friendship with his late father. After being released from prison, the same communist assassinated in his apartment in Tirana the member of parliament Ila Zagushi, who represented Pristina, who represented Pristina in the Albanian parliament, and was also the deputy speaker of this parliament. After a series of misunderstandings, which had their genesis in the different mentalities of old and new Albania, the conflict broke out between the Minister of Interior, Jafar Deva, and Mehdi Frashi, who held the post of Chief Regent of Albania. The conflict between Jafar Deva and Mehdi Frashi could not be endured by Prime Minister Recep Mitrovica, who resigned, followed by the Jafar Deva. The following government was of Fichidina was completely disoriented and without effective control over the country. After these events, the way was opened for the Albanian communists to come to power. The Germans already knew that they were losing the war and were withdrawing from Greece, and apparently not wanting to risk the lives of their soldiers, flirted with the communist partisans and described as described by the English agent Peter Kemp in his memoirs. This agent was sent by MI6 to Albania for the resistance movement there for the fight against the Germans. Later he wrote the memoirs and he observed this, this flirt between Germans and the communist partisan movement. As soon as the Germans withdrew from the Albanian town, partisans forces entered the town and massacred all potential opponents. On 17th of November 1944, the communist partisans entered Tirana after it had been bombed by the Germans the day before. Thus, the communist partisans already concentrated in the South Albania suited the way the Germans withdrew. Being more Machiavellian and led by Serbian emissaries, the communist partisans managed to defeat the forces of the Bali Komtar National Front in southern Albania, which was the main pro-Anglo-American organization. The more they headed to the north, the stronger they became. The arrival in Kosovo, in Pristina, their arrival in Kosovo, in Pristina, 19th of November, in Mitrovica, 23rd of November, and in Novi Pazar on the 28th of November, 1944, accompanied by the Serbian and Bulgarian forces with whom they cooperated. Democratic and national forces were alone. On 8 to 10 of July 1945, in prison, under the weight of the weapons of the communist partisans, a meeting of delegates from Kosovo was held where it was decided that Kosovo should separate from Albania and rejoin to Serbia or Yugoslavia. One can understand that there were objections, as a member of delegates did not come out alive from that. After the assembly, the military regime was established in Kosovo by Comrade Tito. Kosovo came under the Serb rule at both the provincial and the local levels. Those few Kosovo Albanian communists, no more than 20, were placed in peripheral positions. Communist violence and terror in Kosovo continued until 1966, when the president of Yugoslavia, Josip Broz Tito, removed the Vice President Aleksandar Rankovic from the party and state post. The use of the Albanian national flag in Kosovo throughout this period was considered illegal and hostile act. However, Kosovo youth and intellectuals did not give up this flag despite killings and imprisonment. One aspect of life that the Serbian government had not been able to bring back to the state before World War II was education in the Albanian mother tongue in Kosovo. Prior to World War II, the Albanian language was strictly forbidden in schools and public life. After the reconquest of Kosovo by Serbia, Albanian teachers were mistreated, but Albanian schools were not closed. Whereas in the Sanjak of Novi Pazar, the Albanian schools, which were opened in 1941, were completely closed down in 1945, including the one named Frashri in Novi Pazar. On the other side, in communist Albania, everything Kosovar was already treated as a Nazi fascist and fought fiercely. But what was happening on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean? Politicians who managed to escape the bullet persecuted by the communist occupation of Albania and the Serbian occupation of Kosovo fled to all four corners of the democratic world. Most of them were concentrated on America. Since they belong to different political streams with an extreme hostility to each other, that even anti-communism could not unite them. It took the hard work of the Americans and British to create a unique anti-communist front aimed at overthrowing the communist government in Tirana. In 1949, the Americans and British openly expressed their support for the chairman of the Bali Komtar, Mithat Frashri, to become the next prime minister of Albania after they will overthrow the communist regime. Shortly after this decision, Frashri was found dead by poisoning in the hotel room in New York. The case has never been solved, but it's supposed to have been done by Soviet counter-espionage or by one of the Albanian rivals. Before receiving the American and British blessings, Mithat Frashri was forced to publicly give up his party program, which consisted of Kosovo and the other Albanian territories being part of Albania. Clearly, the Americans and British did not want trouble with Tito's Yugoslavia, which had already distanced itself from the Soviets. Even after the death of Mithat Frashri, the Americans and British did not give up on the overthrow of communist government in Albania. The closest American collaborator in this regard was Jafar Deva from Mitrovica. In this period, 1949-53, the Americans launched several saboteur missions in Albania, most of them collaborators of Jafar Deva. All of these missions failed. The reason was that the communist regime of Albania always had accurate information about the operations. The suspicious about this leak of secret information were on Kim Philby, the British agent discovered to have been sold to the Soviets, but even when he was removed, the leak continued. Jafar Deva's suspicious were on his fellow politicians from old Albania, who, becoming jealous of Deva's authority over the Americans, made his missions fail. When in 1953 the Americans gave up the overthrow of the communist government in Albania, Deva continued his activity in exile, but already gave up cooperation with the politicians from old Albania. He remained focused on the cooperation with exiled politicians from Kosovo and Macedonia. When a group of activists started the founding the Third League of Prizren and offered Jafar Deva the post of president of the organization, he accepted it only on the condition that there are no activists from old Albania in this organization. Thus, Jafar Deva became the father of the idea of the independence of Kosovo. Remind this, the same man, the same politician who created the biggest Albanian state, I mean, the bigger Albania, the great Albania, it's the man who concluded that Greater Albania doesn't work. And then he proclaimed the idea for the independence of Kosovo. So since 1966.
5 more minutes.
Oh, sorry. So this was very okay. In the same year, when the Third League of Prizren was founded in New York, a dramatic change took place in Yugoslavia. Tito ousted Yugoslav Vice President Aleksandar Rankovic from all party and state positions. Rankovic was a symbol of violence against Albanians. After his departure, Kosovo became to breathe in the name of equality between so-called nations and nationalities of Yugoslavia. For the first time, communists of Albanian ethnicity were appointed to the leadership of Kosovo because until that there were only Serbs. In 1968, Kosovo gained its constitution and together with the province of Vojvodina became a constituent part of Yugoslav Federation. This is then reinforced by the constitutions of Kosovo, Serbia, and Yugoslavia in 1974, when Yugoslavia was de facto confederalized. And in 1972, the Orthographic Congress of the Albanian language was held in Tirana, attended by representatives from Kosovo. The Albanian language has been standardized since 1916 with the dialect of Elbasan, the city on the navel of Albania in central Albania, where the two dialects of the Albanian language met. This linguistic standard was respected by all Albanian governments in the period of 1916-1945, but with the arrival of communists who were in their absolute majority from the south of Albania, they began to disrespect this standard and of the Albanian language. In the Albanian schools in Kosovo and Macedonia, however, the linguistic standard continued to be taught, although did not correspond much with the sub-dialects of Kosovo. It was this since 1941. Now in 1972, the communist dictator of Albania, Enver Hoxha, imposed the standard of the Albanian language, which was from the southern extreme dialect of the country. The most eminent Albanian linguists, both within the country and those in immigrations, opposed this, but it did not stop this initiative. Representatives from Kosovo at this Congress were introduced by the Kosovo political leadership to accept the standard proposed by their counterparts in Tirana. Being asked by the author of this paper, the political leader of Kosovo at that time, Mahmud Bakalli, answered that he had instructed the Kosovo representatives to accept the same standard of the Albanian language out of patriotic motives, because he felt humiliated when Serbs insisted that Albanians of this side and the other side of the border were two different peoples. The imposition of the Albanian language standards in 1943 put Kosovo Albanians in an inferior position. This was the paradox. Okay, I will jump a little bit here now. How many minutes more? No more, huh?
Around 2 or 3, and then we have enough time to have some questions asked.
Okay. I'm jumping now in this how the demonstration 1981 they were organized in Kosovo, and explain how this was the flirt between Enver Hoxha's regime, who was jealous on the prosperity of the Kosovo's autonomy, and the new nationalistic elite in Belgrade, after the Tito's death. Although no documents that they show, I mean, this cooperation yet been discovered, because no, but I mean, it is clear that they corresponded to each other. I mean, so this was a sort of called and a joint attack towards against the autonomy of Kosovo. What they said, they must. Okay, I will jump this. Even then, we have the period of Azem Vlasi after 1921, who expected to have a help from Croats, Slovenes, Croats, and Bosniak communists in order to resist to Milosevic, but he also failed. And the how it started the democratic processes, or I mean the anti-communist process, I could say, not could say the democratic one, and this interrelation between Kosovo and Albania, and how again, we have also then in 90s the conflict between Sali Berisha, president of Albania, and Ibrahim Rugova regarding whether the Albanians should participate into the Serbian elections. Rugova did not communicate it at all then with, and how during the war period until I will assassinations. I mean, Kosovo almost was near the civil war, and it was the U.S. President George Bush who chose Tirana to state that what is enough is enough. In the end, Kosovo will be independent. This was not a message only for Serbia. This was a message for Albania in the first place. The day when this statement was made was also significant, 10 of June 2007. On the same day of League of Prisoners was held in prison in 1878. And on the same day in 1999, when Serbian rule over Kosovo ended through the UN Security Council Resolution 1244. So that's then the relationship between political classes of problems that Ramush Haradinaj, Albin Kurti, Vjosa Osmani, Viledi Rama, Abdullah Hoti as well, actual prime minister, and so also, I mean, the impact of this inferiority regarding the linguistic standard. So Albania's greatest cultural supremacy over Kosovo appears in the field of media. Albanian televisions enter the Kosovo media market without the need for licensing and without any fees, while Kosovo televisions, in order to operate in their country, in Kosovo, are required to have a license and to pay taxes. This absurd policy of the licensing agency of the media in Kosovo, Independent Media Commission, has its roots in the cultural inferiority of Kosovo to Albania installed in 1970s. Despite the inferior attitude, there is a strong disagreement when it comes to recent history. There are many historical personalities who are considered official heroes in both Kosovo and Albania, but there are also some personalities who in Kosovo are officially considered as a heroes, such as RTV Mitrovica, Jafar Deva, Ila Zagushi, and many others. but which in official Albania they are considered as traitors. On the other hand, some of the Serbian personalities that Kosovo consider Kosovo's great enemies, such as Aleksandar Rankovic, Ivan Milutinovic, Miladin Popovic, etc., are in the official register of heroes of Albania. So I came to the conclusion. A personal story illustrates the conclusion of this paper. A friend of mine from Tirana, who has been working for UNMIK in Kosovo for a long time period, told me in a great confidence, although both my parents belong to the patriotic families, I am ashamed to admit that I enjoy talking to Serbs more than to Kosovars. I replied that this is natural, since he was born in his independent country, his father as well, and his grandfather as well. Serbs are also born and raised in their own country, their fathers and grandfathers as well, while Kosovars are born into captivity in the same way as their fathers and grandfathers. Naturally, it is easier to understand Serbs than Kosovars. His response was, I have noticed that with Kosovars younger than 25, I comprehend more easily. So, conclusion. The stance that Serbia towards Kosovo is the main factor that throughout modern history has politically distinguished Kosovo from Albania. This difference has left deep traces and created the distinction between the Kosovo national identity and the Albanian national identity. If these identities will be closer or further apart from each other, will still depend on the Serbian attitude, friendly or hostile towards Kosovo. But in both cases, this will be separate national identities. Surely, the mentality of the generations that are now up to 25 years old will dominate the mentality of the Kosovo society as a whole when they became 55 years old. They will comprehend easier with Albania, but also with Serbia. The anticipated common future of the Balkans in the European Union will bring Kosovars closer to their brothers from Albania and will also make them friends with the hitherto hostile Serbs, but their unique past will serve as an identity stamp. So thanks. I hope I didn't bore you.
No, not at all. Thank you very much for your comprehensive overview and presentation. I especially like your anecdotes about Vushtree and your Albanian friend working in Kosovo and your friend's relationship with Kosovo Albanians and Serbs. We have received a couple of questions. First of all, I'm going to give the floor to Arjan Spase, Ambassador of Albania to Hungary, and then I will continue on with the questions of Ambassador Laszlo Markus. I'm going to unmute you, Ambassador Spase, and the floor is yours.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Thank you very much for organizing this panel, and thank you very much to Professor Spahiu for the extensive information that he's giving as regards the relations between Albania and Kosovo. On my opinion, not on my opinion, but indeed we are talking about the same people that the fate of history has divided into two countries or into two territories close to each other. I would like to emphasize something that drew my attention, and it regards the separation that Professor Spahiu made regarding the contribution of the Albanians Orthodox or Muslims in the as regards the independence of Albania or the process of nation building. The professor said, or let's say that he emphasized the role of the Orthodox Albanians in this process. I would say that all of the Albanians have contributed. Doesn't matter whether they were Muslims or Orthodox or Catholics. When it came for issues of national building or when the fate of the Albanians has been jeopardized, faith became irrelevant and it was placed in the second tier, and the Albanians acted as one. I would mention here, or I'd bring here the League of Prizren, and you see that the leaders of the League of Prizren, they were from, how to say, Muslim background, they were from Orthodox background, and from Catholic background. And you have the same during the independence, the proclamation of independence of Albania on November 28, 1912. And you had the same also in recent years when Kosovo became independent. So this was my comment, and I again would like to thank the Institute and Professor Spahiu for this panel. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I'm glad that you have comments there. Of course, I said that all communities participated into the nation building. Otherwise, the Albanian nation could not be formed. But it started the Orthodox community, continued the Catholic community by time speaking, and then joined the Muslim community. But as I mentioned, when we speaking about the start, we're speaking about the elites. But dipping the national idea to the masses, my argument is that in Kosovo they went earlier because of the Serbian terror. I mean, because the Serbs pull out over 200,000 Albanians from the Sanjak of Niš. So today's Serbia, who then when they came, in territory of Kosovo, they raised the awareness, they raised the national consciousness. And also, I mean, the League of Prizren, it was, it was exactly because of this event, because so many people were scared what is going on. I mean, whether the Serbia would advance onto their territories, and that's why they were organized. Of course, when I Protestant regarding the Protestant community, which is the smallest community, I mean, they started the first school in Albanian, but then immediately a year after, they started this school in Korça. In Kosovo, there opened so many schools in Albanian by the Muslim community. So official history of Albania, which was also reproduced in Kosovo, that was taken, I mean, from Albania, ignores this fact for many other reasons. But I mean, because the entire Albanian historiography is so much falsified, so much, so many facts that were not, were hidden. For example, if you ask university professors of history, for example, they will know, they'll say that Ismail Kemal Vlora was then first prime minister of Albania. But if you ask them who proposed him to be a prime minister, they have no answer. And it was Recep Mitrovica, as I mentioned, prime minister of Albania in 43-45, the guy who proposed that. Or, for example, many schools, many streets in Albania or in Kosovo, they called Ismail Cemali. And they don't know, for example, that the Ismail Cemali is not a surname. It's just the second name of Ismail. And the surname is Vlora. But this was hidden because during the time of Enver Hoxha regime, all family of Ismail Cemal Vlora was either was killed or imprisoned. I mean, and that's why he wanted to this surname to disappear, you know, from the public opinion of the time. And that's why our historians usually don't know how is the right surname of the first prime minister of Albania. I mean, not to mention many other cases, but this is a very problematic, you know, in a not only in Albania but also in Kosovo, because we copied this kind of history during the time of Enver Hoxha, just putting off the photography of Enver Hoxha, and instead of it putting the of Comrade Tito, but the content was the same. Next question, please.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for being here and for your remarks and questions. And now I will pass the virtual microphone to Ambassador László Márkusz.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Okay. Oh, dear Professor, it's good to see you, and thank you very much for this history, giving us actually this historical background. I think this is very useful. I hope actually my Hungarian colleagues have been able to follow you, because many of the names are not well known, unfortunately, in Hungary, except for few historians, which is a shame, because let me just mention one interesting thing. You mentioned Ismail Cemali, first Prime Minister of independent Albania, and I found maybe a year ago a letter in our archives, which was written by one of the sons of Ismail Cemali from Paris, from his emigration in Paris, and it was sent through our embassy in Paris to Governor Miklós Horthy in the two World War period, sometime actually in the early 1930s. It was written in French, and in this letter he referred to their old friendship when Miklós Horthy was still actually part of the Austro-Hungarian fleet and visited Ismail Cemali and his family in those years, in those crucial years of the formation of independent Albania. But anyway, I don't want to take up too much time. I would have two questions. The first is, I think it's important to clarify or to give your view, at least for our Hungarian colleagues. So which date is more important for the diversion of the history of Kosovo from the history of the rest of the Albanian lands? Is it 1912, the date of Serbian occupation in the First Balkan War, or maybe it's 1944, the Yugoslav reoccupation, especially if we take into consideration the nation building activity of the Tito regime? Since you mentioned that the idea of independent Kosovo came up after World War II, my guess would be that this is the second. So perhaps 1944 is even more important date than the first one, 1912. But I really would like to hear your take on that. And I would have a second question, if you allow me. This is more sort of topical issue. Probably many of us read this statement from former Prime Minister of Kosovo, Ramush Haradinaj, that in the absence of European integration, there should be a referendum held in 2025 on the unification of the Republic of Kosovo and the Republic of Albania. And of course, it hit the headlines down definitely in Kosovo, I think to some extent even in Albania. I just would like to hear your comment on that. I know actually that you referred to that in one of your articles in the Serbian daily Politica, but I would like you to share actually your comments with us now actually in this way. I think it's important to hear whether it's just a daily political, or I would say actually part of the election campaign in Kosovo, or there is a serious support for something like that in the population of Kosovo. Thank you very much again.
Thanks. Let me start from the second question. I think this declaration of Ramush Haradinaj, it's just his wrong idea that he can blackmail United States and European Union, or at least to say to the public that he is a macho man in front of the European and American diplomacy, that he is a man who doesn't give up and who, I mean, he can even speak about the other projects, you know, like this one. But now it's clear, obviously, that after as much as Kosovo became more independent, I mean, more institutionally is growing up, they understand that unification with Albania, it's not an option. I mean, it was an option when Kosovo was occupied, when it was not recognized. But you can imagine, for example, if you will ask ordinary people, the American embassy in Pristina is the biggest one in the region. I mean, it's bigger than in Belgrade, in Tirana, in Athens, in Sofia, in Skopje, elsewhere. So it's the biggest one. And if you would say, okay, to the people, are you agree that American embassy from Pristina should remove here and went to Tirana? They will say, oh, no. This, of course, the story about, I mean, we all textbooks of history and literature are full of writings and ideas of national awakeners who are speaking about one nation, about nation which will gather all ethnic corpus, all Albanian ethnic corpus. So, this, what they learn at the school and what it's coming into the practice, it's confronting each other in the minds of all the people. So sometimes some, especially Albin Kurti and Ramush Haradinaj, and sometimes even Hashim Thaçi, they use this, you know. But as I mentioned, that was it's very intrigative that the guy who created the big Albania, who even was able to negotiate with Hitler's representative Neubacher for not interfering German army into the internal issues of Albania, not handling the Jews to the concentration camps. So that guy who created ethnic Albania, he was the same guy who came to the idea that joining with Kosovo with Albania doesn't work. So he then came to the idea for independent Kosovo, and I believe that if the Americans they insisted on independent Kosovo, not joining with Albania, they were influenced by Jafar Deva, because he was much of the time collaborated with them until 1978 when he died. So this is my answer regarding this, what Ramush Haradinaj told. While regarding the first question about what is the crucial moment, I tried in my article to say that this is just a series of episodes that they are consequent to each other. I mean, that once the later derive from the previous one. And so, but the first, of course, it is a decision of London Conference for the Albanian borders, who divided Kosovo and Albania. So from this, I could consider this as a crucial point. And while then during the Second World War, one disrupted this conflict between Jafar Deva and Mithat Frashi, who was also a patriotic nationalist, you know, and the great intellectual as well. This came from these misunderstandings, and these misunderstandings between Kosovars and Albanians and the Albanians were instigated by, for example, by the Serbian Communist Party at the time. We have, I remember when I taught at University of Tirana in 1990s, and when I went for 4th of February, when I entered the class, the entire class was up, standing up, and I say, well, what's happened? They say, this is a minute of silence because of the victims of Jafar Deva in February 1944. And because all the time were I mean, and even official historiography says that at that day, Interior Minister of Jafar Deva killed 86 citizens of Tirana. He made repression and terror there. But when I studied this case, I saw that there was not 86 victims, but they were on 11 victims. And these victims, they were not communists, but then they were some sort of citizens, ordinary citizens, whom the communists killed in order to accuse Jafar Deva and the other Kosovars. So this act, you know, produced the animosity, and following this kind of facts, you know, civil war in Albania started. You know, then we have the stories about the great partisan victory over the Germans and so and so. But we see now from the documents that from the memoirs of the British agents, from the memoirs of Neubacher, from many other documents, that de facto was just a civil war between Albanians, which on the end the communists won. So because they were more Machiavellistic, because they had because the position of the Americans and English were not to leave out the borders between Albania and Yugoslavia as they were before the Second World War. So this was a crucial moment. And we have also one document written by American ambassador in Athens, who was describing the political forces in Albania in 1944. 1943-44, he said that, you know, he described as the best those who are in government. I mean, who said that they are cooperating with Germans, but they are not Nazis, not, I would say that they are using the opportunity to serve the country, but I would rather consider them as a pro-American or pro-English than pro-Germans. But while the war's forces were communists, you know, and the other two groups, monarchists and the Republicans of Bali Komtar, he said they are proclaiming that they are fighting Germans, but as well they are also not fighting Germans. They are waiting American and British victory over the Germans and to jump into the power. So, and neither the communists are fighting against the Germans. The communists say he's fighting the other groups, and after the Germans leave, they would be much more prepared to take power, which already happened.
Thank you very much for your questions, Ambassador. I'm afraid we are running out of time, but I would like to.
No problem.
Exactly, but I'm going to take advantage of my position as a moderator and have my 2 questions asked. My first question with regards to the Kosovar identity, and my second question is more timely. So after Kosovo declared its independence in 2008, scholarly attention has mainly focused on not just state building, but nation and identity building as well. And whether it was possible to create a common Kosovar identity. What do you think, Professor? Would it be possible, would it be ever possible to create a common Kosovo identity that incorporates Kosovo Albanians, Kosovo Serbs, and all the other minority communities within Kosovo? And my second question.
Okay, let me answer in this, okay. Then continue. Regarding this, I wrote an article published some 10 years ago, I think, and Ambassador Marcos, he already read it, you know. But you know, that's Kosovo nation. Clearly, it's the mirror of the Albanian nation. You know, it's consisted by the Albanians, Kosovo Albanian. Even Ahtisaari, when he made his plan, I mean, regarding Kosovo, he gave positive discrimination to the minorities, and he mentioned minorities and how they will be represented in the parliament and so. So those minorities, apart the Serbs, are in the way of integrating to be integrated into the Kosovo nation. When I'm meaning Bosniaks, Turks, Roma, Egyptians, Ashkali, perhaps even Goranis. Regarding the Serb community, that will be, it is much more problematic, although also it's a tendency of that. But it is problematic because by Ahtisaari, Kosovo schools in Serbian schools in Kosovo, they are not Kosovo schools in Serbian language, like they are Bosniak or Turkish schools in Kosovo. For example, it is a Kosovo school with Kosovo plans and programs and curricula, but they are in a Turkish language or it's in a Bosniak language. But schools in Serbian, they are schools of Republic of Serbia into the territory of Kosovo. So students and pupils, Serbian students and pupils, they are following the curricula of Ministry of Education of Republic of Serbia. They are just financed by the government of Kosovo. So this was a deal done by Ahtisaari. As well, the Orthodox Church, I mean, it's all churches and monasteries are left as a property of Orthodox Church of Serbia. They are not Orthodox Church of Kosovo. So, and this would be a problem for the integration of the Serb minority within the Kosovo nation, because they have also double citizenship, and they're voting for the national elections in Serbia. What will be the future of this community? We will see, but of course that will not be the same like the other minor communities in Kosovo, who I foresee that in near future they will be integrated. Because speaking about, for example, Albanian nation, in Albania, they also Albanian nation was born as a monoethnic but multi-religious nation, like Hungarians, monoethnic and multi-religious. But in the meantime, you know, after the 100 years of existence, we had already the prime minister who was not ethnically Albanian. We have a president who was not ethnically Albanian, who belonged to the minority communities. So we have many representatives of whom, and the attitude of the Albanians in Albania are very integrative, you know. When I taught at University of Tirana, for example, when I asked a student from South Albania something, and I realized that he's a Greek belonging to the Greek minority, although they were in the last semester of the university, all his colleagues, they were surprised that their colleague belonged to the Greek minority, because then nobody realized. So that means that he was, I mean, the Greek minority in Albania was very good integrated. Second question, please.
My second question is about the future. You've already mentioned the relations between Belgrade and Pristina with regards to minority issues or the dialogue. And my question is about the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue. What do you think? What is your opinion about the future of the dialogue? Can we expect major changes, both positive or negative changes in 2021?
I think this is obvious that dialogue should succeed sooner or later. I mean, Serbia is surrounded by NATO and European countries, and it will give up one day or later. Sooner or later, it will give up and will change its policy towards neighboring countries, and including towards Kosovo. So Kosovo leadership doesn't help so much in this, because they are not not to the level that they should be, a leadership of a nation who want to get progress and to the extent of what a small nation could do it, you know. Depends so much on how the Americans are dealing with Kosovo. I mean, whom they are, what kind of politicians they will helping to be in power, because in Kosovo you cannot be in power, you cannot come to be a president or prime minister without being blessed by the Americans. I mean, even it's just it's enough, for example, for an American ambassador to say that he doesn't disagree with certain politicians, then that politicians to get lose votes or to lose its authority, or to say that he is agreeing with that, then I mean, to jump and to be much more, to get much more authority within the Kosovo society. So they have a role here, and if they will choose the right people in the leadership of Kosovo, they could make a better progress in the dialogue with Serbia.
Thank you very much, Professor. I'm very grateful that we could organize this webinar with you. I think it was an excellent presentation, a very comprehensive and interesting one. And I'm also glad that we could manage to have many interesting questions with regards to the history, with regards to identity, and also to some timely topics. On behalf of the Institute, we are also grateful for your cooperation. And I would like to say a big thank you to our participants, to our attendees for their questions. And without further ado, I would like to wish all of you a very nice afternoon. Professor, thank you very much once again, and I hope we can meet in person soon.
Hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon. Hopefully the sooner the better. Thank you very much, and enjoy your afternoon.
So
goodbye.
Best regards to both ambassadors that made questions, and I'm very glad to meet them. All the best to you.
Thank you very much. All the best.